Chapter 5. On the ride back to the DeRosier farm, I went over what I said to Cheryl. Those were big words said on the spur of the moment. I had this idea that anyone who went to reform school was doomed for life. I didn't want Cheryl to have to go there and end up in one either. I could let the DeRosiers suck up my dignity for now, and I could pretend that they had me where they wanted me. But my future would belong to me. I had said to Cheryl that maybe we would live together, but that was a long way off. Maybe things would change or I wouldn't have to live up to that statement. Or maybe if I became so rich and important, people wouldn't care that I had a proud métis for a sister. As we approached Ogbini, my thoughts returned to my present predicament. Just what was in store for me? It was easy to think to myself that I didn't care, but living it was different. I'd often thought to myself that those three DeRosiers were crazy. That night when I did the dishes and they all sat behind me silently staring at me, I was sure of it. Earlier that day, when I had returned with Mrs. Semple, Mrs. DeRosier had made a big fuss over me. It had made me sick and I hadn't been able to hide my hostility towards her. For that whole summer, they wouldn't talk to me except to give me curt orders. Ricky and Maggie made no comment about Cheryl, and I thought this plan of theirs was giving me the silent treatment must be the hardest on Maggie because she was such a verbal person. The only companion I had was Rebel, who had now adopted me as his new friend. When I could sneak off, I'd go down to my spot at the riverbank, taking Rebel with me. By the end of summer, I didn't have anything good to tell him. You know, Rebel, I think you're going to be my only friend around here for a long, long time. When I first came here, I hated you because you were their dog. Now I think of you as Cheryl's dog. You saved her life, you know. You must miss her as much as I do. But now you don't have to worry about protecting her from them anymore. Doesn't help me from being jumpy, though. If it's not the hot, stuffy air in my room keeping me from sleep, it's staying awake listening for sounds. I'm so scared they'll do something during the nights. They're crazy, Rebel. I don't trust them one bit. I wish you could sleep in my room. Rebel would give a low whine and wag his tail to indicate that he was listening. Whenever I had one of these talks with him, you want to know the latest? That old hag gave me a box of school clothes. You should see them, Rebel. All grandma stuff. And she told me that from now on I won't be able to use the sewing stuff. I'm going to look worse than a Hutterite. I guess I shouldn't say that. They look all right to each other. But me, I'm going to have to go to school in those things. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm glad they built that new high school. That means Ricky and Maggie won't be in my school. And I hope Ricky doesn't fail or he could end up being in my class next year. This year, I'm going to ask Jennifer if she can mail my letters for me and if I can have letters for me mailed to her place. I'm positive that the old DeRosier has been throwing out all my letters away. Cheryl said she wrote to me and I wrote to her, but neither of us got any letters at all. I sure hate it here, Rebel, except for you. Oh yeah, and you want to know what else that old hag came up with? Now, if I want my clothes washed, I'll have to do all the laundry and the ironing. But if she thinks that's going to keep me from doing good in school, she's wrong. You know, Rebel, you and me, we talk the same language. We both whine. I smiled and I scratched him behind the ears. Cheryl had said he'd like that. Then I got up and walked back. I started grade 8 as the laughing stock of the school, and from that first day on the bus, I was often called Grandma Squaw. I renewed my relationship with Jennifer, but I could see that even she was embarrassed to be seen with me. One day we were in the washroom and she made fun of the way that I dressed. I expected that from the others, although when they would call me Grandma Squaw, it was more painful than I expected, and each time a lump would come into my throat. When Jennifer teased me, I did start crying. She immediately became contrite and sympathetic, and that made me cry even more. April, don't cry, she said. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. Hey, listen, I'll bring some of my stuff and you could keep it in your locker, okay? I was wiping my eyes when our home economics teacher walked in to see what was taking us so long. What's going on? What's the matter, April? Jennifer explained. Mrs. DeRosier is making her wear these clothes, and she won't let April use the sewing things at home to make them look better. Would it help if I transferred you from the cooking class to the sewing class right now? The teacher asked me. Her kindness made me want to cry all over again, but I kept my self-control and simply nodded. Between the chores I was assigned and all my homework, there wasn't much time to alter my clothes. Whenever I could, the first things I would do would be to shorten my skirts. They hung down almost to my ankles. I'd still have to wear the black, ugly shoes to school, but once I'd get to school, I changed into a pair that Jennifer had brought from home. I told her about my postal problems and she had checked with her mother, and they agreed to be my go-between. The first letter I wrote was to the Dions. It would have been to Cheryl, but I still didn't know where she was. In November, my letter to the Dions was returned. They had moved from St. Albert. Before Christmas, I had a visit with Cheryl. She was full of enthusiasm about her new foster home. Mostly it was because the Steindals had horses. Mr. Steindal gives me lessons most nights, and when he's not busy, he's been teaching me how to ride. We went on a sleigh ride last week. Oh, April, it's so much fun. It's easy being good there. The kids at school are all right. They don't make fun of me or anything. And some of the girls who like horses made friends with me, but that's only because they'll figure I'll invite them over and they'll get to ride. Mr. Steinville gave me his own horse to ride. His name is Fastbuck. I got to help clean their stalls and feed them, but I like doing all that. She went on telling me about all of the good things that were happening to her, and I hardly said anything. What could I say? That I was lonely and miserable and my foster mother dressed me funny? I envied Cheryl. I envied her having her own horse to ride. I envied that she could feel so much excitement. I knew I should be so happy for her, but comparing our lives, I simply envied her. I even envied the fact that she was so smart at school. Before we parted company, I got her address and told her Jennifer's. In early February, I received my first letter through the new courier system. I had sent her a letter in January. Dear April, how are you? Mrs. Steindal says that we will have our next visits in April or May. I can't wait. We had to make speeches in front of the class, and I made mine on buffalo hunting. Mr. Darnell, my teacher, said I was an exceptional Métis, because most would have avoided the subjects. That made me so proud that I just had to send you what I wrote. Tell me what you think of it. Have a happy Valentine's Day. I've enclosed a homemade card. Do you like it? I'm going to ask Mrs. Steindal if you could come at least to see me here for the summer holidays. I want to show you my horse, not really mine. Would you like that? I told them about the DeRosiers, but I don't think they believe me. That's the only thing I don't like about them. I got your letter. I feel so sorry for you, April. I wish there was something I could do to help you. I'm glad you got a friend like Jennifer. I'm glad, too, that Rebel's keeping you company. I sure do miss him. He was a good old dog. They have an Irish red setter here. Nice looking, but what a nervous wreck. She follows me all over the place. I thought of all these funny things to tell you, so you would laugh when you read this letter, but once I started writing, all those funny things disappeared. Sorry about that. Well, I'll close for now, and I'll be seeing you in the springtime. Right back soon. Love, Cheryl. Buffalo hunting. That was almost as bad as giving me a book on Riel. I looked at the card. Cheryl had drawn a picture of a horse, a girl, and a red setter, meant to be her setting. How lucky could one get? Then I chided myself. Now, April, you should be happy for her. Isn't that what you wanted? Didn't you want her to be safe and sound? Yeah, sure. But can I even be a little bit jealous? Great. Now I was talking to myself. Dutifully, I started reading her speech. I had to be impressed. It was so well written and it was so obvious. She had pride because she was writing about her people. The Métis hunters, equipped with buffalo guns, used one method known as running the buffalo. This was perhaps the most dangerous way, but definitely the most exciting. Men on horseback would ride through the stampeding herd, shooting prime animals. Once a shot was fired, the hunter had to pour some more gunpowder from his buffalo horn into the muzzle of the gun, spit in one of the lead balls which he carried in his mouth, hit the gun butt on his saddle to shake down the powder in the ball. All of this was done as he raced his horse among the stampeding buffalo. If a horse stepped into a gopher hole, or if the rider became dismounted for any of the reasons, his hours as a buffalo hunter were probably numbered to mere seconds. Perhaps a bull would have turned on him, or a stray shot could bring him down, or maybe he would have loaded his rifle too fast or not properly enough that it would explode and blow his hand off. The hunt required steady nerves, much skill, and expertise in horsemanship and marksmanship. For a very brief moment, I was caught up in her excitement, and then I wondered how she ever had the courage to stand up in front of her class and give the speech. I would never have the courage. Grade 9 became the very worst year I'd ever have. A lot of the kids in my class had started pairing off and going steady. I'd never been interested in boys except as friends. When I was younger, I thought different ones were cute, but that was the end of it. As long as I lived with the DeRosiers, I knew that I would have to give up any ideas about special friendships with boys, and the easiest thing to do was simply not to look. But then a new family moved into Albany, and with it came a boy who was in grade 11, the same class Maggie was in. While I was secretly worshipped him from afar, Maggie talked about him every single night at the supper table. Mrs. DeRosier even went so far as to invite his family over for a Sunday dinner. The boy was named Peter. I guess he liked me because after that Sunday dinner, he would stop and talk to me at school. Being seen with him brought me more friends. I loved school. Until the other kids' attitudes changed. Maggie had not been openly hostile towards me. I knew she felt that way because of Peter's friendship with me and not with her. It made me smug and more sure of myself. As soon as the whispering started behind my back, I knew she and Ricky were behind it. Whatever they were saying spread quickly throughout the school. Kids were looking at me and snickering as I'd passed by a group of boys and they'd whistle. I started getting notes on the desk that said things like, if you really want a good time, meet me at such and such a place. Some of the notes had obscenities in them, and the first comments I got from the boys were also obscene. First, Peter stopped talking to me, and then Jennifer began avoiding me. This confused me even more. Jennifer was the kind of girl who would stick by a friend no matter what, and I asked her, "What's going on, Jenny?" Jennifer had looked around quickly because there was other kids watching us and obviously talking about me. "April, I have to go." She slid me a note that she'd still post my letters for me, but that was all. I became so angry and hurt. My first impulse was to tell her to just forget it. But she was my only connection with Cheryl, and I had to accept things the way they were. Once again, I was a loner, and now I didn't have a single friend at school. I was glad I still had Jennifer as a go-between on letters because in January I got another fat envelope from Cheryl. At lunchtime, I looked around to make sure Maggie and Ricky weren't around. If they ever found out that Cheryl and I were exchanging letters, I felt sure they'd put an end to it. I was rather disappointed when I opened the letter and found most of it was a speech on the Métis. January 26th of 1964. Dear April, how are you? I just know you're waiting for my next speech with anticipation. Well, here it is. Actually, it's not really a speech. I'm just caught up in this stuff. I don't think, scratch that. It's a silly expression. I think my fellow classmates might not be able to hack another speech on Métis people. I was going to deliver the speech, but now I've decided I will keep it among my papers on the history of the Métis people. I think it's important that we ought to know our own history. It's rather a short history compared to other races, but it's interesting, as I've already stated, and I wouldn't have minded one bit living in those days. Mrs. McAdams used to have so many good books on the subject of natives. I've been babysitting lately, and next time we go to Winnipeg, I'm going to spend all I've got on books. I wish I could afford to buy every book there is. Sally says I'm soon going to need glasses. I doubt it. I hate to have to wear glasses, wouldn't you? It's un-Indian. Oh, I made the volleyball team. We're going around to different places and playing the other schools. Rita, one of the girls in my class, says it's not fair that I'm so smart and athletic too. Of course, I'm not the only one. It's too bad you couldn't try out for after-school sports. I know you'd be good. Come spring, I wouldn't join any outdoor stuff because I'd rather practice riding. Write back to me, April, and tell me what you think of my project. I'm going to work on something about Riel. I need a few more books, though. Well, I'll sign off for now. Got a load of homework to do. Love, Cheryl. And again, I dutifully read through her essay. And again, she wrote about the Métis people with such pride. The two armed parties met at Seven Oaks. Grant sent an emissary to Semple, demanding his surrender. An argument ensued, and a settler fired. The sound of gunfire brought a nearby group of 50 more Métis to the scene. The battle-experienced Métis fired their rounds of shots, and they fell to the ground to reload. The settlers, thinking they had just shot these men down, began to cheer. The Métis, with their guns reloaded, charged the settlers. Terrified, most of the settlers turned and ran. The horsemen took over as if running buffalo. They overtook the settlers and shot them. Within 15 minutes, 20 settlers and 2 of Grant's men were dead. I thought it just made the Métis look like bloodthirsty savages, but Cheryl went into great detail pointing out all of the grievances of the Métis and why they had fought some of their battles. But when I finished reading, I didn't feel much happier. I hated dates and company names. And how come all of this mattered to Cheryl so much? Was she going to keep it among her papers? Did it help her accept the coloring of her skin? Was that why we thought so differently? That and her superior intelligence. One had to be intelligent to find this kind of thing exciting. Skin coloring didn't matter in this school. Everyone treated me like a full-blooded Indian. Grandma Squaw. I hated those DeRosier kids so much. I sure wished I knew what they had been up to this time. A few months later, I did find out. The guidance counselor, Mrs. Wartzman, was waiting for me in the hall one day at lunchtime. She said she wanted to see me in her office. As Mrs. Semple had done, the counselor came out and made her speech. I suppose the speech would have been okay if I had been guilty of any wrongdoing. April, I've heard some disturbing things, and I feel like I should talk this over with you. I know that you're a foster girl, and perhaps that's the reason. You feel a psychological need to be loved. Well, what I'm trying to say is that you shouldn't let Raymond and Gilbert fondle you. From what I understand, you've also been trying to flirt with Mr. DeRosier. I sat in the chair with my mouth open. I felt such humiliation. I was sure my face was red. I thought later that Mrs. Wartzman probably assumed I was embarrassed because the truth was coming out. Perhaps it's not my place to be talking to you, but it's such a sensitive issue. I know that you're doing well in your grades, and I want you to warn you that a pregnancy could disrupt your life. Let's see if we can't get your life on the right track again, and if Mrs. DeRosier has taken this up with your social worker. If I can say that if we had this little talk, okay? Mrs. Wartzman finished it with a smile. I walked out of her office in a daze. It was a warm spring day, so I went outside to eat my lunch. I really wanted to avoid the lunchroom and have some privacy to myself, but there were kids outside, and when they saw me, some of them snickered. I wanted to die, crawl away into some hole, and never to be seen again. Instead, I sat and I nibbled my sandwich. If it had been Peter I was accused of fooling with, I would have been embarrassed. But Raymond and Gilbert, both at the same time, not only were they ugly and pimply, but they passed their grades only because of their age and their size. I didn't have anything against them, but I'd have to be plumb out of my head to even look at them in that way. Well, it was no wonder Jennifer and Peter stayed away from me. But then how could Jennifer believe that of me? And had Raymond and Gilbert gotten that same kind of speech? Probably not. Only girls got pregnant. For the rest of that week, I walked around thinking of this. On Saturday, I found myself at the riverbank, talking to my old friend Rebel. I know I shouldn't feel so sorry for myself. I know other kids go through much worse than me, but knowing that doesn't help very much. At least Gilbert and Raymond are getting out of this rat hole. I wonder who they're going to accuse me of doing things with next. And if they don't get some other boys, I'll probably have to take on the bales off the field all by myself. How could Jenny believe all those things about me? How could she? I thought she was such a good friend. Maybe she doesn't believe them. Maybe she's just scared to be seen with me, and boy, I'm going to get even with those DeRosiers. I don't know how, but somehow, some way, I'm going to get them. And when I get through with them, they're never going to get a foster kid. Never.